Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I can see people jumping on so far. If you want to, pop a note in the chat with where you're joining from today, so we can see who we've got here with us. We've got Alistair from SIBO Labs joining us today. He's going to be going through the SIBO Labs product in a lot of detail, so we're really looking forward to sharing all of that with you. We're just going to give it a couple of minutes and we'll kick off at probably 5 or 6 past. Just wait for a few more people to join. Thanks for waiting and thanks for being patient with us to kick this off. Hi, Gavin. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone today. Okay, I'll just move on to the agenda. Today, we're just going to be going through an introduction to AgriWebb. I know we'll probably have a lot of existing customers with us today, but we're going to give you a little bit of an intro and then go through some product updates we've been making recently, specifically around SIBO Labs. And then Alistair's going to take us through the SIBO Labs product in a lot more detail. So existing customers already using SIBO, using the SIBO and AgriWebb integration can see how they can be getting the most value from all of the additional tools SIBO offers, because the integration with AgriWebb is only one small part of that. So yeah, we're really looking forward to sharing all of that with you. And then we'll finish off with the Q&A. Hi, Ben. A few housekeeping items just before we kick off today. Any questions, please put them in the Q&A as we go through the webinar. Don't wait until any moment. If it's relevant throughout the session, we'll kind of pause and we'll answer it, or we'll get through them all at the end. So please put your questions through. We're happy to answer them all, no matter how big or small. And we'll be sharing a recording of this session this afternoon. So feel free to reply to that, ask any questions. If you want to follow up on anything you've heard today or anything didn't make sense, please reach out to us. Our team is more than happy, as always, to get back to you and make sure everything is super clear. The other couple of things just to go through before we kick off is there will be a 30% discount for any AgriWebb customers that want to purchase the SIBO Labs integration this month. So yeah, just reach out to us after the session. There's a discount code and you'll be able to access that discount if you're interested in the SIBO integration after this. We also have a referral program that we just wanted to let you know about. We know a lot of our customers that really love using AgriWebb already talk about it with their friends. We get a lot of our referrals from our existing customers. And we now just launched a program so we can essentially reward our customers that are doing that for us. So yeah, let any of your friends know. You can receive $100 for every customer you refer that signs up. Cool, so we'll jump into a little introduction now. As I said, I know a lot of people here are already AgriWebb customers, so we won't go into too much detail on this, but essentially what we've been trying to do for the last 10 years is really digitizing that farm notebook, bringing all of your records, all your farm data into an app so it's easy to access at any time. No more losing notebooks or trying to flick back weeks or months or years to find information. It's all easy to search and access at any time. We're really focusing on that full farm management. So bringing together, your animal management, your paddock and pasture and grazing management, and then also your workforce management and business management. So pulling together all of those things into one place so you can really streamline how you manage your operation. Here we kind of break out some of the areas that we really like to focus on end to end. So we have our, animal management from genetics all the way through to weights, paddock management. And these first two sections here are really what we're going to be focusing on today, the inputs in your grazing management, and then also business management, biosecurity, making sure you're always compliant for audits, tasks and planning. So we're really focusing on that full farm management end to end. Something that we launched 12 months ago, which is the reason for this webinar, is our marketplace. And that's just following on from that goal of that full farm management, to be able to bring in data from other places with other tools you may be using into one place so you can access it and manage your operation really, really smoothly. What we're focusing on today is going to be SIBO Labs, which is the pasture management. But we also have a number of other areas in our marketplace if you haven't seen them. So we integrate with individual animal management hardware, Gallagher, TrueTest, AllFlex, Shearwell. We're recently kind of looking into some more sustainability integrations with Ruminati for carbon assessments, and then water management as a really key and important one. So FarmBot, Farmo, AgBot, water sensors, trough monitors. And we've recently just this week launched with Gallagher water monitoring as well. So you may not have seen that, but that's just gone out this week as well. So really building out all of those different integration support so you can really pull all of your data into one place to help with your decision making and make it really, really simple. So this is what the marketplace looks like if you haven't seen it before, and if you're kind of new to the integrations and marketplace. You can access it from the navigation in the left-hand side on the web app version of AgriWebb, so you won't be able to see it in the app yet. And you can kind of categorize and sort down the left-hand side here through water and pasture management. Here, the SIBO Labs is circled, so you can see what that looks like. And you'll be able to click in and get all the information you need about how you can turn that on. What SIBO Labs is in AgriWebb, in a sentence, is really it helps us. We get data from SIBO and it helps us populate this feed on offer number in AgriWebb, which drives a lot of our grazing tooling. So it drives all of our map insights that show you, your feed on offer, how many days remaining you have in every paddock, your grazing days remaining at an individual paddock level. So we'll go through this in more detail as the session goes on, but really at a high level, we're helping create that feed on offer number so you can get all of these insights more automatically. This is just a view of the feed on offer map insight, so you can start to see, the varying amounts of food you have in every paddock when you're kind of keeping those food numbers up to date. So particularly around SIBO, for people here that are using SIBO, we've actually been working with the SIBO team for 3 years. We ran a kind of beta for quite a long time before we launched the marketplace a year ago to get feedback from customers, understand what people were looking for, to see how it was working. And it's been 12 months since we kind of launched that publicly and people were able to sign up to it. And since then, we've got 465 farms active using SIBO. So a lot of customers are using it. A lot of people are getting a lot of value from it. We have had some feedback as well from customers. So we're going to go through that today as well, because we've been working on some improvements that we want to share with you. But yeah, we're really, really excited by the number of customers that are using SIBO, that are getting a lot of value from it. And yeah, we'd love to encourage you to continue, anyone using SIBO, to continue to share your feedback, to continue to let us know what else you'd like to see, because we're always listening to that. We're always reviewing that feedback and seeing how we can improve the experience for everyone and help make, your grazing decisions easier for you. So essentially, what does SIBO do? And I'll preface this with, this is just one small part of SIBO, because this is the one, SIBO sends us one number that we populate in AgriWebb to help calculate that feed on offer. The entire SIBO suite is much fuller than this, and we really encourage everyone to look at that more fully. And Alistair's going to go through that, but this is what SIBO does in AgriWebb. So SIBO is a satellite-assisted forage budgeting. What SIBO does is they capture 10 by 10 tiles across the entire paddock. So instead of just getting a couple of samples from a paddock to see what feed on offer you have, they're taking a picture of every 10 by 10 square of the entire paddock, so able to get a really good representation of that entire paddock. They estimate all the biomass of total standing dry matter in every paddock every 5 to 15 days. Why 5 to 15 days? So the satellite passes where we are in Australia every 5 days, essentially. So if for some reason the satellite passes and there's a lot of cloud cover, there's bad weather, an image may not be able to be taken. So we have to wait another 5 days until that comes around again. So on average, we're getting an image every 5 to 15 days, hopefully every 5. But that's the reason why sometimes you may not see an update every single 5 days. The other thing to note is SIBO takes these images fence line to fence line. So this includes all the dry matter, everything in the entire paddock. So it's everything around the fence, it's creek lines. They're not excluding anything like that. It's all the dry matter in a paddock. And it's a really consistent measurement because they're using the same algorithm and the same tool to kind of calculate this every single time. So there's no kind of differing of opinions and people kind of looking at things differently. If you're doing site measurements, it is a really consistent measurement. So if we move on to some of the customer feedback we've had that has kind of encouraged us to make some changes here, is some feedback from some of those customers that have been using SIBO is SIBO can over or underestimate the feed on offer in a paddock. Customers didn't know, and we weren't showing customers when the last update from SIBO was delivered in AgriWebb. So that was becoming an issue, like I mentioned earlier, when the satellite wasn't able to get a reading because of cloud cover. It wasn't clear when that last update was. And also some questions around accuracy. So again, if there's cloud cover, SIBO does have varying ranges of accuracy, and that will be different depending on how accurate image they can capture. So I'm going to go through some of the improvements that we've made. Just as a little warning, I hope this doesn't seem too complicated. There are a few calculations that we do to kind of calculate food from these numbers. So I'll try and explain it very simply, but we will have some help documentation in our help center. And if you have any questions, please shoot them through in the chat and I can go through them in more detail at the end. So this is what AgriWebb looks like today. This is on the web app or in the mobile app, if you have the SIBO integration or if you don't. So where we've got this red, outline, this feed on offer value is either populated by SIBO or is populated when you create your own feed on offer record in AgriWebb. So no matter what, this is populated either by SIBO or AgriWebb, and then we calculate your available feed on offer by adding the growth rate, deducting the residual, and we're getting your available feed on offer, which is what we use to do all of our grazing calculations throughout the product. Give you your days remaining, all of that. So what changes have we made? Based on feedback we've been getting from customers, we have made an update to the value coming from SIBO to show total standing dry matter instead of just populating that feed on offer value that I showed you earlier. And I'll take you through this in just a moment. We always show the date SIBO was last updated, so it's really clear if there's been a delay in getting a reading through. And we've also added a new utilization record. So it makes it easier based on a number of different reasons, which we'll go through, for you to essentially nominate how that pasture or how that total standing dry matter in that paddock is going to be utilised, depending on the species that's going to be grazing, the time of year, if there's any wastage, all of that. And yeah, add the ability to record wastage and detachment. So what does that look like? For customers that have the SIBO integration activated, they'll now see a new section in the paddock dialog here that's currently has the red square around it. So instead of SIBO populating the feed on offer field here, SIBO will now populate the total standing dry matter field that you see here. The SIBO logo is above, so it's really clear. We'll show the date of, so yeah, this is what SIBO will now populate. I don't think SIBO would ever be giving us a round number like that. That's not accurate. That's just a design, unfortunately. But yeah, the SIBO will populate this total standing dry matter. We'll always populate the date of the last update, so you can see when that last update was, if there was a delay in being able to capture that image from SIBO's side because of bad weather or whatever that is. Then we've also added over to the left here, the utilization record. So this is where you can say how much of that dry matter is going to be utilized. So if you know that you've got, a lot of high growth around your fence line, or, a lot of shrubbery around a creek, that you automatically kind of deduct from your own kind of visual feed on offer calculations, you can exclude that. What we do is we'll automatically be setting, like we do for target residual, we'll automatically be setting this to 100%, and then you can go in and create a record to change that. You can multi-select as many paddocks as you want, so you can apply the same utilization to the entire farm, or you can apply it to different, grazing areas or paddock areas across your farm if you have different kind of utilization for different pasture types. You can also add wastage and detachment in here for, if pastures are being trampled up north, if you have a huge amount of detachment there, and that will be deducted before we calculate the feed on offer. So now this feed on offer piece for customers using SIBO will be calculated using the total standing dry matter and dry matter utilization above. So we'll take the total standing dry matter and then use the dry matter utilization and deduct the wastage and detachment to populate your feed on offer. And this is going to be a much more accurate number to derive your available feed on offer from. So that's kind of the key change that we're making to the SIBO integration, to just make it a lot clearer what information is coming from SIBO, and to give you a little bit more control, particularly for customers that have different species, different age classes, different pasture types on farm, so they can control that utilization a little bit better. And yeah, so then this calculation will just work exactly the same. We'll take the feed on offer, add the growth rate, deduct the residual, and that will give you your available feed on offer. So I hope that's been clear, but any questions, please reach out. Just going into a little bit more detail on why we need utilization. So as I'm sure everyone knows, but utilization can be consistent across the entire farm or vary considerably by paddock. And this isn't something that SIBO can give us. So this is something that needs to be still entered on a farm by farm basis at this stage. Different pasture types will have different utilization at different times of the year. So again, to get that accurate feed on offer value, you're going to need to sometimes add these inputs depending on the time of year to get that accurate feed on offer number into the system. Again, feed utilization will vary between stock class and species. Cattle and sheep are going to graze different species differently. And this can help as a workaround for under and overestimating. So what are some things that we can encourage southern producers to do to get really accurate feed on offer values when using SIBO? They can record utilization for different times of year, different paddocks, different grazing plans, and add wastage and detachment if necessary. And also encourage people to utilize SIBO's other tooling like pasture key to really understand what data is coming through from SIBO, because you can start to see through SIBO's other tools where you have essentially where all of that dry matter reading is coming from. So you'll be able to see if it's including areas that you wouldn't include when you were capturing your feed on offer values. What can northern producers do? There's less variation in kind of the pastures across a northern system, so they can record utilization for different times of year if necessary, and make sure they're capturing detachment, because that is something that the SIBO satellite does pick up too, and we'll record that as total standing dry matter when that's not going to be utilized. And again, utilizing SIBO's other tooling like pasture key. The other thing that I would just encourage customers using AgriWebb to do is ensuring that they're keeping their DSE ratings up to date in AgriWebb. For mob customers, that's using the DSE record. And for individual customers, that's using the DSE calculation. So you can either, calculate that by age class or weight, or by body weight percentage, because all of these grazing calculations are driven from that DSE value. So really, also keeping that up to date is really important to make sure we're getting accurate numbers and being able to provide you with accurate data back. So one last thing that we have been chatting to SIBO about, this isn't going to be included in the update that I've just gone through above. But another improvement that we are considering is adding an accuracy field here. So SIBO do have the ability to let us know how accurate their reading is based on the quality of the image they were able to capture. So, that generally is all about cloud cover. We haven't done this yet, but it's something we're considering. So, let us know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see or if that's something you're interested in. And we'll continue to work with SIBO to see if that's something that we'll also add in to improve this integration. So that's kind of everything from me on, the feedback we've had on the SIBO integration so far, and what pieces we've been working on to try to really improve all of our customers' experience there. This is only one small part of SIBO, and it's not changing the information that we're getting through from SIBO at all. It's just kind of giving all of our customers more flexibility and more visibility into what numbers are coming through from SIBO in AgriWebb. So yeah, thank you. I hope that was useful, and I'll hand over to Alistair now to go through all of the really actually fun and exciting pieces that SIBO is able to offer, because there's a lot more to it than what I've gone through just now.
Thank you very much, Stacey. I might just get you to give me a thumbs up that my sound is working. Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making the time. My name's Alistair Rayner, and I'm the Extension Manager with SIBO Labs. And I've been working with SIBO for about 2 years now. My background is as a livestock advisory officer, and I specialise in beef cattle. So I bring to SIBO, I guess, a slightly different take to maybe the approaches that our founders have, because I'm thinking very much about how we use our tools in terms of livestock production and how best we can integrate the data that we are delivering to you in a way that you can actually use it within your particular program and enterprise. So today's discussion is really about this concept of forage supply versus forage demand. And I guess where we're trying to come to you at is two things. First of all, we can help you very well understand the supply that you have in front of you. And we use both our satellite imagery that we collect, but also we combine that with machine-based learning and algorithms, which are based on 7,500 Sentinel sites across the country. And these are locations where producers and consultants are actually taking field assessments, either by visual assessment or pasture cuts along specific transects, and uploading that data to help the models actually understand the variation within species and combine that with what we're seeing within the satellites to give a much more accurate reading of the total standing dry matter that we observe at each time that the satellite passes over. But I guess that when we come back to it, and from my perspective or where we sit, is that livestock production, we're really thinking about the fact that it's being driven by a daily level of feed intake. And we measure that obviously in dry matter. And it is important for us to be able to understand that there is a variation in both the dry matter intake, depending on the weight and the class of stock, but also then that interaction between what's actually available in the paddock and the quality that's offered. Remembering as we start to think about what we're doing with the data, there is a baseline required for livestock as you progress through a production stage. And so forage budgeting is not, I guess, an annual set and forget, or even a monthly or a seasonal set and forget. It is often a dynamic process where we are constantly updating what's in front of our livestock, the weight of our livestock, and matching the two to achieve either a production outcome that takes into account where we want our pastures to be, but also to ensure that our livestock are hitting those goals. The integration with AgriWebb in doing this automatically helps provide greater accuracy and greater timeliness in terms of doing that. But it's certainly not the only way that you can approach a forage budget. Probably one of the broader, and I think from my perspective, more important strategic concepts is to try and understand what your individual supply looks like over a 12-month period, and to understand where your peaks of pasture production are and where your gaps are, and start to think about how well aligned your livestock production goals are against what's happening within your location. If you're actually able to understand and have a better knowledge about your feed gaps and when they occur, it's often a much more effective heads up, if you like, and you can be more proactive in terms of making stocking decisions or making decisions around supplementary feeding, if that is part of your approach, to be more effective in what you do. And we really want to see our data being used at that level as much as being used as part of an integration with AgriWebb, where you're getting your tactical forage budgets being updated on that regular basis from paddock to paddock. One of the I guess the easiest ways, and probably the most effective way for a lot of people to start down this process, and particularly if you're not a SIBO user or a subscriber to our subscription of PastureKey, is to remember that we have the product known as the Australian Feed-Based Monitor, which is a joint project between ourselves and Meat and Livestock Australia. It was launched in November 2021, so it's been freely available to red meat producers since that time. It's driven by your linkages between your MyMLA account and your livestock production assurance program. So it's linked to your actual pick, and it's designed to give you an overview of your property and the hectares that are within your farm boundaries, to show you your total standing dry matter in kilograms of dry matter per hectare, to show you your ground cover across the same period, and also to show you your woody vegetation change. Obviously, our satellites go over every 5 days, but in the free version that we have within the Australian Feed-Based Monitor, you are provided with a 30-day rolling average. So you can see the month-to-month changes, but you can also look at those rolling changes and go back, if it's today is the 15th of March, to go back 5 days ago to look at what it would have been like at that point in time, so at the 10th of March. But if you go back from the 10th of March, we'll take you back to the 10th of February. So you're going back in those 30-day rolling averages to see your month-to-month changes. What that allows you to do is start to see the trends that are developing across your property as the season develops, but also to start to have a comparison of the historical variation that exists within your farm. We base the Australian Feed-Based Monitor on the land parcels that are associated with your pick. So we don't go down to the high resolution that people who are familiar with PastureKey may be expecting, which is driven on a 10 square metre basis. But what we do give you is an opportunity to see the broader variation and the broader trends. And as a free service, that's something that can actually become quite powerful and a very, very good introduction into using satellite-assisted data in your forage budgets and your tactical planning. So when we look at this particular slide, the colours have changed a little bit on me, but as an example, this is a series of feed curves for a property that I've done some work with on the northwest slopes, just to the west of Gunnedah. And so you can see that we can compare over the last 8 years, or going back to 2017 when we started the service in March on 2017, but we can compare our month-to-month seasonal comparisons so that you can see what's been happening over that period of time. The idea obviously is to start to see whether there is significant variation or significant peaks or surpluses, and then to start looking to see on one level if your season where you're currently based, and so at the moment, this point in time here on at the start of March in 2024, is about exactly where we started in 2017. Now, if that trend continues and we shovel along that line or something similar to that line, there's an opportunity to go back and look at your data records, to go back and extract information from your AgriWebb reports or from other farm reports that you might have, to say the season deteriorated fairly quickly and we should have made decisions about stocking 6, 8, 10 weeks earlier, whatever the time frame might be. This graph acts as a prompt to start to encourage you to think about what strategic decisions you can make and make them earlier, given the way that the season might be looking. So it is a very useful tool in starting to give you an analysis of the trends that are happening and how that might compared to seasons that have gone past, and where there might be trigger points to be concerned about. It's useful also to start thinking about how well we align our production calendars against our seasonal trends that happen for our farm. We can extract the data from the Australian Feed-Based Monitor and turn it into a range of different things as you might like to. And I've actually taken the data from this farm and extracted it and worked out what the average total standing dry matter is for that 12-month period over that farm, based on the data that we have so far. And you can see that we really don't have significant troughs that occur. What we start to see is a little bit of a late summer kick, which we generally expect. Things start to tail away from the end of March into April. It's not a huge drop, but something probably that we may be aware of. And then things gradually improve coming into spring before we start to drop fairly quickly in terms of that late spring, early summer. Now, you might start to be able to look at that and consider about where that might mean in terms of total standing dry matter that you normally work on, whether your peak demands or growth periods are actually aligning, but also what that might mean for quality. As we start to see feed deteriorating, we often see that drop in quality and the corresponding impact that has on livestock production. So this is a tool that while it's sitting outside what we would push into your AgriWebb subscription, is a tool that you can use at any time to actually start to see how your farm is progressing, but also has your season changed from where it might have been 20 years ago, when your seasonal peaks and troughs may have been earlier, may have been later, or might have been more extended. I use this data to do lots of different things. One of the things that I've been looking at in this data was to actually start to look at the differential between livestock feed intake and the livestock production that we have. And I can start to do this on a manual level to calculate things like a forage budget over a 12-month period, or I can start to think about how well do the two curves appear to marry up with each other. So when we look at this green curve on the outside, this is the average daily growth as predicted for that particular farm based on the CBO data that we've collected since 2017. So that's for every hectare within that farm. Now, that's not reflecting whether it's improved perennial species, whether it's improved subtropical species, or a mixture of native grass. It is taking into, or even a crop, it is taking into account the total standing dry matter that was available at that point in time. But as you can see, the curve that bounces along over the top, very similar to that last blue line that I showed you. Down below in this orange graph underneath is the daily dry matter intake that one breeding cow, based on 600 kilo mature weight of a British breed, and just as a generic British breed, is predicted to require over her production cycle starting on the 1st of January and ending on the 31st of December. And obviously based around a July calving, or the end of July calving, we see that kick in feed demand going up, staying reasonably high with that calf on them, staying there until that calf is weaned at the start of April, the end of March, dropping away down to where they're a dry animal, and then before they kick along. So we can start to see that on a broad basis, the feed curves are relatively close to being useful in terms of making decisions to say our alignment of production targets is not dramatically out of kilter with what the seasonal growth curves would look like. However, that's all very well to say we grow this much feed and there is obviously a surplus here, but no one runs just one single breeding cow. And so you can start to look at things such as, what number of animals would I have to run to actually achieve, if you like, parity, which is utilizing the feed that we're actually growing. So not including consuming more than is actually being growing, so our pasture is being depleted, or allowing pasture to accumulate by not consuming all of it. And so at a broad level, you can start to look at your stocking rates just using that data on its own. And so in this case, the calculations that I looked at this morning is that while we have cows that are lactating or in that last stage of lactation, we could run about 4 cows per hectare in that location to achieve parity. So whatever we grow, we're actually consuming. And apart from allowing for trampling or anything like that, and it starts to get a bit complicated doing those explanations in a simple run. But what we'd be looking is around about 4 cows per hectare. Once they're dry, our stocking rates can obviously increase reasonably significantly until calving occurs, and then we have to start to bring our stocking numbers back down again. So again, you could use this data at a very broad level to look at your own location and to start to think about how well your overall stocking rates are marrying up against your seasonal capacity to supply that feed to your livestock. So at a broad level, that data is readily available and extractable from the Australian Feed-Based Monitor, and something that can be done for any location in the country. And again, it's based on that 1 hectare basis. Obviously, that broad level is very useful, I think, on a strategic level of understanding. But for us as livestock managers, when we're trying to set some trigger points to start to think about whether our pastures are actually suitable to our location, there are very clear opportunities to do something more regularly and more frequently. We would encourage, obviously, the easiest way to do things with the greatest efficiency, where we're not manually transcribing data or copying and pasting and doing that, because we know that that becomes time consuming, and producers are less likely to persevere with doing their budgeting if they have to do a lot of that manual effort. However, there is the opportunity to extract your data on a broad level out of the AFM and put it into a simple Excel template, such as this one from Meat Livestock Australia, which will help you calculate things such as a stocking rate or the number of days that you have grazing to achieve a certain pasture cutoff point that you would like to do. It's effectively the same process that has just been shown to you in the AgriWebb integration. However, if you haven't subscribed to PastureKey and you still wanted to have access to a pasture budget, this becomes a very useful and helpful workaround for people to actually look at doing. So when we then have a look at the manual inputs, you would be extracting your current feed on offer or the total standing dry matter, and you'd be required to actually start to be thinking about where your feed quality might be based on your assessments, having a look to see whether it's gone to head, whether it's green and leafy, or else what. So that will help you do a calculation based on your particular requirements. When we then progress to something like PastureKey, which is our subscription service, the differential between the Australian Feed-Based Monitor based on that 1 hectare resolution and a 30-day rolling average is PastureKey now offers a greater degree of resolution and a greater degree of capacity to understand the variability that exists within a particular paddock and within the farm boundaries. So this is an example of a farm that I do quite a bit of work with, and it's based very much upon looking at those particular paddocks that you'd be familiar with. If you're an AgriWebb user and you're looking to integrate with SIBO, your paddocks are already mapped and that data is pushed into us. We will then be providing that data back to AgriWebb in your integration, so that for every paddock we can offer you the total standing dry matter on that 10-meter square resolution. So you'll have the average for that paddock. But as you can have a look, and if we have a look at, say, this center paddock here, these darker green areas show where we've got much more concentration of high levels of total standing dry matter. The lighter, more amber colors show that we're actually having less total standing dry matter. So while you might look at the average figure that you get in your AgriWebb integration, or when you look at your particular SIBO map, such as this one here, you'll see we've got our total standing dry matter and the area of the paddock. But you can have a look at that and actually make a decision that says, I have potentially got areas which are being either overgrazed or have been exposed to another reason where some of that particular material has not been growing as much as it would be. And maybe I need to make some more active decisions about how I encourage my livestock to utilize that paddock more evenly, or to be prepared to find the fact that your paddocks are not being grazed as evenly as you might assume. So the maps and the resolution that you see within a SIBO map is much more powerful than simply taking a total standing dry matter figure or a feed on offer figure out. It actually starts to show you the way that your livestock or the way that the season has been impacting within the paddock environment. That in itself, I find a lot of people really respond to and find it very useful in terms of shaping their decisions around how they might move livestock, whether they do other tactical grazing decisions or even whether they use an appropriate supplement. It also, on a longer term basis, provides the basis for evaluation for structural improvements to a property, whether there might be the need to actually put more water points in, to actually break paddocks into smaller environments to have a more greater consistency of grazing. The pasture key service offers not only the total standing dry matter that you see there, it offers every paddock the total standing dry matter average, the area. It calculates the food on offer based on the grazable area and that area that has less than 20% tree cover. So when you have a lot of trees, the satellites can't see through the trees, and so feed under the trees, we know it's there, but we can't predict with great accuracy how much is there. So that can be an issue in terms of getting an effective food on offer calculation for you. But we can also present to you in a second layer things such as what we call fractional cover, which is a reflection of what is actively photosynthesizing at the moment, what's actually a mixture of green and dead material, what's dead material, and what's bare area. And again, when we look at, say, a TSDM figure, that's all very well to say that there's 2,100 or nearly 2,200 kilos of dry matter in there. If we were to look at the fractional cover of that, how much of that is actually dead standing material, or is it a mixture of green and dead material? And should that then be grazed with an appropriate supplement or not? And that level of detail, which is probably not available to people who are only using a feed budget they're making their own assessments on, or are not using pasture key, will find that a little bit more difficult to calculate. So it is an advantage to be able to look at your feed budgets, but also to have a look at the original data source and to see what that's telling you from what the satellites are actually seeing. We are now starting to offer through the Australian Feed-Based Monitor and as part of our program, a series of reports. One of those that I wanted to touch on at the moment is this new report, which is basically showing us our feed-based summary and starting to show you what's driving your feed on offer based on your growing season and based on the data and the growing season going from July to July. Underneath each of those years, we have the rainfall for the location where that particular farm is based. And above this, we have this green line, the green curves here, which is showing the growth that has occurred throughout that 12-month period. And you can see where those growth curves are responding to rainfall events, as well as then in this buff color, the accumulation of growth that has occurred in that growing season. The blue line is the TSDM readings that we take every 30 days across the year. You'll notice that there's sometimes a difference here. So in this case here, this white area, the difference between the blue line of total standing dry matter and whatever feed is actually growing or has accumulated in the previous month. This area is basically being driven by feed carried over from previous months. So feed that wasn't grazed, feed that was in paddocks that were left closed up, feed that you might have stored away. That becomes a useful tool in terms of helping you understand, what's actually driving you in terms of your total standing dry matter, how much of your TSDM is being driven by fresh growth and how much is really being driven or carried forward on feed that has accumulated from months previous to that, and what are the quality reflections or ramifications of having that. Not everybody is very aware of what their pasture history looks like, and this becomes a very useful report to start to benchmark what you can start to do. So in terms of, I guess, where we go to from here and where you'd like to enter into a program. So at the very base level, we'd encourage every person who's a red meat producer and is eligible to make sure that they're actually a member of Meat and Livestock Australia, that their membership details, including their email address, is current, and that they then create a My MLA account. That email address they use to create it ideally should be the same as the email address that is on your membership data with MLA. If they're not, when you go to start to use the AFM, you will probably be told you're not an MLA member. It's important not to yell at me, but to make sure that you actually update your details to make sure that the two are the same. Within your My MLA account, you need to link your Livestock Production Assurance Program, your LPA, up to that My MLA account. So it's a single sign-on, but that then links your PIC into the Australian Feed-Based Monitor. From there, you can select the land parcels that are associated with your farm, and that is basically all you need to do to then start to generate those graphs I showed you earlier and to start to be able to access some of the reports. Using that information, you can then start to drive it into your own pasture budgets or elsewhere. One of the things that we've been very conscious about in SIBO over the last few months has been that we have a number of people who are using SIBO products, both the AFM and PastureKey, but are probably not getting the full value from their services. And that comes back down to, I guess, a lack of true understanding about how ruminants actually utilize pasture, what drives ruminant nutrition, and what drives livestock intake. And if you're unsure or a little bit hazy about those things, then it becomes very difficult to start to match your herbage mass or even use the data that we provide you on your herbage mass with the actual needs of your livestock. And so what we want to try and do this year through a new product that we've developed, which is called Grazing for Growth, is to take producers through that basic understanding of livestock production in terms of ruminant nutrition, the drivers of ruminant intake, and then to start to match that with the data we provide you through SIBO Labs' products. So Grazing for Growth is really designed around adding more data. If you're an AgriWebb user, you'll also find that really valuable because you'll understand how to get the most out of that new product that Stacey showed you in terms of understanding detachment, understanding wastage, but also starting to get a better feel for how you might get a better response from your livestock for the pasture that you have in front of you and make better sense of the data that we are driving out of the satellite summaries every 5 days. So our Grazing for Growth workshops will be delivered across the country on demand. At the moment, what we're encouraging people to do is to scan this QR code that you can see on your screen, which will take you to a registration page to register your interest. Once we get a critical mass within a particular location, we will then go and deliver the workshop. And the workshop is based on the theoretical components of livestock nutrition, livestock intake, and then starting to then use that in feed budgets to use better decisions around your efficiencies of supplementary feeding, your targets for livestock production, such as reproduction or for weaning or for growth, and to actually then start to get a much better handle on how you can use your product to achieve the things you want to do as a livestock manager. So we're really about trying to add value to your subscription by understanding what you want to do with it and to give you a better outcome at the end of the day. So I think from there, Stacey, we can go back to the Q&A if you like, and try and answer some questions.
Thanks, Alistair. That was great. There were a few that came through while you were chatting, so I might direct some to you to start with, if that's okay. The first one came from Ben Irish, and he said, can any of this data be considered or even extrapolated if you were year-round mating?
Yeah, Ben, and we'll have to, I mean, this will be a reasonably complicated argument, but we have got a number of producers in the north, and I'm assuming you're talking about the Australian Feed-Based Monitor, but we're using that particularly to try and support producers who are year-round mating. And again, what we're looking at is you can start to look at your calving pattern. We have, there are calving histograms that will show you that even though you are year-round mating, you will have, I guess, those seasonal peaks or the seasonal trends where you've got calves being born in, I guess, a couple of seasonal trends reflecting what the seasonal position has been. So you can start to see whether that whether year-round mating is actually coinciding with what the seasonal bumps are doing, or whether you've got some misalignment that is starting to happen. We could pick that data out. It's something that we can do, and is useful to extrapolate and to start to look at whether there is more value in trying to think about moving away from seasonal joining to even restricting your joining to a say a shorter period, because anything less than a year is a shorter period, but whether you might try and align that more with when your seasonal feed flushes occur or against your green date, depending what that might be for your particular location.
Amazing. Another one's come through from Amy. She said, hi, will you ever look at measuring in SDH rather than DM?
I doubt it, because dry matter is almost universally the standard that we look at, and it allows us to compare everything on an equal footage. Once you've removed the moisture out of something, what we have left is basically the material that's there that actually we can compare wherever we are. And I guess from my livestock nutritionist point of view, I always say, well, water itself has no nutritional value. So when we talk about rations, we're always talking about the dry matter of that feed rather than its actual weight, which could be confused with moisture within the plant or moisture that's fallen because of rainfall. We always do it on a dry matter basis. I don't think that we'd ever look to change across to SDH.
Thanks, Alistair. Another one that's come through from Bruce is, can the food calculation take into account edible forage trees, e.g. in the Kimberleys?
So we're doing a lot of work, Bruce, in the rangelands, both in the southern Kimberley and in the goldfields, as well as in the rangelands in the east. And we don't actually include trees within our calculations. So we're looking at, and because the satellite is measuring the change really in that growth that it picks up from the satellite as it passes over, and you really don't see that change in trees the way that you see it in a forage typically as such. So the calculations and the work that we're sort of looking at is really based more on that forage that grows from pastures, herbs, forbs, and so on. Trees and shrubs and browse, if you like, which we know comprise part of a livestock diet anyway, but we probably, looking at all the research that's been done, don't contribute a huge, shouldn't say don't contribute a huge, are not the majority component of a diet unless there is nothing else to eat in the first instance. So yes, we know they will consume browse, and that might be part of dry matter intake, but it is not the primary driver until you've got nothing left on the ground. So that's why we're not, factoring it in that way.
One other thing I will add to that, Alistair, is I didn't mention it when I was talking about the utilization record earlier, but we have designed that in a way that you can obviously either reduce that utilization, because if SIBO's over, not overestimating, but calculating all that dry matter, you can actually go above 100% if for some reason there is feed. I know in most cases there wouldn't be pasture that wasn't being estimated by SIBO, but in this case, if it was something you wanted to be able to calculate it in AgriWebb, you could update that utilization to 110 or 120% to take into account that foliage. So your numbers in AgriWebb were correct. Just let me jump in for the next one. So the next one, Alistair, is, can SIBO indicate feed quality at all? Can it separate species or species groups, like legumes or weeds?
No. So we're just estimating what's actually there, what's growing, what's dead, or the mixture in our fractional cover. So the way that I explain it to most people is that what we're looking to try and do is give you an accurate starting point of how much is there. If in pasture care, as a pasture care user, you can look at it and look and go, okay, most of it is actually green, growing, photosynthesizing, then you can go out with that in the back of your mind to assess it. But you will still have to look at it and determine and know your paddocks and know whether that is feed that you actually find value in, or whether it is a species that is undesirable, or and use it as a reflection of that. So it might be that the reflection of the fractional cover that you see is reflecting a weed growth that's following a fire event or a flood event, and it's reflecting undesirable species, and that might be very different to how you'll approach that paddock to one where you would go out assuming that the green is actually going to be a tropical pasture species that you've actually sown.
Awesome. And I think this next one is going to be similar, Alistair, but another question on if there's any work being done to estimate the age profile of a pasture of the feeds.
Yeah. Okay. So when our ground truthing takes place, producers have got the opportunity, or the consultant who's using our app has got the opportunity to put extra data in. So that might be the stage of growth, it might be the digestibility that they're assessing, it might be the species, or any of those other pieces of information that will go into it. That information is all part of the machine learning, but obviously it's not something that we could confidently give to everyone and say, here's your digestibilities for this level. As a livestock guy, I'd love it, but we're a ways off that yet.
Awesome. Well, we're coming to time now, so I think we'll start wrapping up. But thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Amy, if you're still on, I can't see. I will just call out with the stock days per hectare. That is something that we're looking at starting to track in AgriWebb as we really focus on all of our grazing tools this year. People might not be aware, but we are currently working on designing a new rotational planner. So customers focused on grazing are going to be able to start planning their rotations and future moves in AgriWebb. So as part of that, we are really focusing on all of our grazing metrics over the next kind of 6 to 12 months. So we are looking at that. And again, if you have any feedback about how you want to see that, or how that would be useful to you, please send us another message, and we'll definitely take that into account as we're looking at that. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. Last couple of reminders: you're going to receive a recording of this in your inbox. There's that 30% discount for anyone interested in looking at integrating SIBO labs with AgriWebb. And just a reminder about the referral program as well, $100 if you have any friends or family that might be interested in using AgriWebb. But thanks everyone so much. Really appreciate your time. Know how busy everyone is. Thank you, Alistair, for joining us. The updates that I went through today aren't available today, but they're going to be coming very, very soon, hopefully next week, and we'll send out some information to everyone once they're available. And yeah, please, any feedback, as always, about the SIBO integration, about AgriWebb, send it across, and we look at it every day, every week in a lot of detail to help us make decisions about what we're going to be doing. So really appreciate any feedback that anyone has.